everyone, welcome along to the Rugby Pod. Big Jim and Goody are here as usual, and we're brought to you this week by Beer 52. They bring you beers sourced and curated from the best breweries on the planet. Each case of 8 beers comes with an award-winning beer magazine and some snacks. There's no minimum commitment, so you can just take the free case, try the beers and see what you think. If it's not for you, you can pause or cancel at any point. And this month they're sending out a case called Christmas in Poland. That'd be right up your street, wouldn't it, Jim?
That's as good as just looking. Did I tell you what I did the other week? I can't remember.
That's German.
Well, it's the same language, is it not?
You can't say that, Jim.
You know what I mean. Well, it's a das and an ist and a bish. Like what I mean. Okay, I hold my hands up. I am multilingual, but I don't know Polish. Or Polish, however you say it. But I don't know if I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I sat with my case of Beer 52 and I had 1 and 2 and 3 responsibly. Next thing, is there 40 beers in there? Because next thing, it's 1:30 in the morning and I'm watching Oasis on YouTube till 1:30 in the morning singing the house down, voice of an absolute angel. So I don't know whether to thank Beer 52 or, well, I'm going to thank you. Beer 52, thank you. Get it? 52 and thank you, right.
All you need to do is go to beer52.com/rugby and cover the postage. That's the word beer followed by the number 52.com/rugby to get your first case of 8 beers for free. And you'll be supporting the Rugby Pod as well by doing so. How has your week been, boys? Jim, where are you?
You're looking smart as well, Jim.
Corporate. I'm looking corporate.
Nice.
Why do you say that? What define smart, Andrew?
Well, you've got a smart black shirt on with buttons. And it's long sleeved, and you've got your cuffs done up. Normally, you're in a t-shirt with all sorts of stuff down the front of it. So I'm just impressed with how smart you look, James.
With the Superman tattoo hanging out the bottom, which now I'm coming to resent. So I thought I can't see this thing anymore. And I had this conversation. JJ's 9, so now he's starting to look at the tats, thinking 2 things, or one of 2 things. My dad is either cool as shit, or he looks like an absolute idiot. I've got a Superman tattoo on my forearm. At 23, it looks unbelievable. Genuinely, lads. At 38, my goodness me. Superman looks like Batman now. It is that bad. So I've got long shirts. I've got more corporate. I'm in a WeWorks in Edinburgh. I need out of the house. The garage / studio is freezing. So thank you for your observation, Andrew. You're looking fuller, happy.
Yeah,
happy, fuller.
Well, we're the champions, aren't we? We're the Autumn Nations Cup champions, so I'm delighted. But interesting weekend for me, actually. And I had
You were at the gym.
I was at the gym. Yeah, I was.
He says. He posted another video of the archive with that blue Adidas t-shirt.
No.
If you want that blue Adidas t-shirt, just send it to Adidas.co.uk. Get 7% off. Andy Good.
And also, it comes in black as well. I had a bit of a Jim Hamilton moment this weekend, and your scenario, your story of last week's gone viral, hasn't it, Jim? The old
the Evans. I had no idea, Goody.
It was just unbelievable. The people jumped on it, and Evans Cycles were getting them. Have you had your refund yet? Have you taken your receipt? Have you found your receipt? Or have they just gone, Big Jim, the Scottish legend, here you go, have 80 quid credit at Evans Cycles?
I just walked past the store and I just nodded, but I had my mask on. They might not have known it was me. I walked past the store and nodded. I was going to flip the bird, and I thought that was a bit too intense. So I just walked past the store, and then nothing. I just walked past, and that was it. And then I thought, oh God, onwards.
It's a little bit like when you came up against Ebenezer when you absolutely bottled it. Then, so you talk a good game, but just all fart no poo.
Him and Sia Khaleesi actually have been messaging with me in the trio of messaging on Instagram. Loved it. Made my week last week, I think it was, or the week before. It's all molded into one. But talking of Ebenezer, he says hello, Goody. He says hello.
Does he?
No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't.
Goody, what was your rage like watching France-England over the weekend? Because your Twitter was saying you might have had a bit of Twitter rage going on almost.
England by 20. England by 20, Andrew said.
Well, no, I changed it. I went even more. Just before kickoff, I thought the weather's good. This England team, it's the best England team, bar Manu Tuolangi, that we can pick. Let's have it. We're winning by 30. It was against the France 3rd/4th team, kids that no one's heard of. And now, my God, you have heard of some of these boys now, haven't you? The French boys, they were phenomenal. I just felt sorry. I felt sorry for those NHS staff that got 1,000 tickets to go to Twickenham. They've been through so much this year. First bit of excitement. They go to Twickenham, they get a ticket to go to Twickenham, thanking them for everything they've done for the country over the pandemic, and they have to watch that kickfest. So I felt, I had a couple of messages from NHS staff saying I was really excited going to Twickenham. Yeah, that's what Eddie produced for us. So, I mean, I think everyone expected, every pundit out there said England would win this comfortably.
Not me.
I don't think, Jim, you're like...
Did you see my match point predictor? I changed it to... Once I told you, when we call these games early in the week, on the Monday and Tuesday, it's more of a superficial. It's more of a superficial thing from my point of view. As the week builds and I engage myself emotionally, like I did in that French camp this week. Sorry, like I did in that French camp last week. As I get to game day, just before kickoff, I changed it to France by 4. That's got nothing to do that I had to do something from a match point predictor. I just had a feeling that my goodness, Andrew, I was close. They, French, were close.
Did you actually predict France by 4?
I predicted France by 4.
And that's purely because you needed like triple points or something crazy to climb back up the league. So you can't really claim it. But yeah, I think, everyone looked at the two teams on paper. It was a dry day. England have built to this big crescendo around. We've won the Six Nations. We've not tinkered with the team at all, really. They've been together for about 8 weeks now. And you're just waiting for the one performance that clicks. And all I could think of was think back to when we played France at Twickenham a few years back, and we ended up scoring 40, 50 points or whatever it was. And I'm just thinking, today's a day. That's going to happen again. We're going to kick it a bit, of course we are, but then we're going to play a bit more. And oh no, not until Dan Robson comes on, Max Malins at fullback comes on, did anyone try and speed the game up. Ben Earl made a big difference as well. And it was just... like everyone, Elliot Daly, every time he gets the ball at fullback, hoofs it back or hoofs it up in the air. George Ford,
hell of a kick though.
He's got a big old boot. George Ford, every time he got the ball, hoofed it. Now I haven't looked into the stats. I'd love to know how many kicks in play there were from individuals, because it just became so dull. And England didn't offer a lot in terms of attack. One opportunity we get in the first half, we go to a crossfield kick to score, and that's the only way we're trying to score tries. And it was disappointing to watch. Let's not beat around Jim's bush. Second half we were better, but the French, fair play. Jalibert at 10 was phenomenal.
He was class.
When he goes off, Carbonell comes on and plays really well, kicks his goals. And the French team, they showed a desire, an application, an attitude, a work rate, which is symptomatic with a coach that is Sean Edwards and everything that he's always done. And it doesn't matter that they weren't first choice or second choice. A lot of them were third/fourth choice, but they rocked up, balls on the table, and had a proper go. And France, I tip the slipper to you. Often I stick them in the bad in my section later on, but France, well played.
It's potentially shown a blueprint. If England do play like that, a way of beating England, and not many teams would be able to beat England because physically they're maybe not up to the challenge, but you look at that French team, how young they were, again, without watching too much of the top 14, knowing a few of their names, watching their young second rows perform the back row, the physicality that they've got. And there's not many teams that have got that. And we spoke to Ben Kaiser last week, and he was talking about the appetite for rugby down in France or across in France, however you look at it. The future is unbelievable for them. You think of the World Cup in a couple of years' time and everything you're hearing about, they're going full goo for it in terms of the country and nation. It's not just France that need it, rugby needs it, because if that's the way that they're going to play and they've got the ability to play, then you don't want to say that they're favourites, but they're going to be incredible. And you look at it as well, you look at like Fabien Gaultier. I've had my opinions on him before. France took a risk making him head coach. He scrapped a load of the top line players away, and he took a risk as well, arguably because he could have said we're building towards the World Cup. I thought they were, but again, I weren't watching the game and thinking, it's a kick fest. I was probably because I was looking at France thinking how good they were, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, potentially there's a blueprint there to how you beat England, but you need to have the players to do it. And there ain't many teams, bar France, South Africa, Australia in parts, from what we've seen in the Rugby Championship and obviously New Zealand as well. But I enjoyed the game. I bet the NHS staff that were there, they could have been there into the middle of the night. Loving it.
Yeah. I just think that like the spectacle that England put on and the tactics, which we've said time after time, since we played Italy in that first game when it was just a kick fest then and we were thinking at some point they're going to stop doing this. They've done it every game now. They've played, let's be honest, we've played teams that haven't been anywhere near at their peak. We played Italy in the Six Nations, then we played Georgia, then we played Wales, then we played Ireland. And you're looking at those games, Ireland were nowhere near where they could be. Wales, we know, we talked to the cows come home about where they are at the minute. And we didn't dispatch any team, and we're at our strongest. And, you know, Eddie Jones talks about results. Yeah, mate, we just want to win, and we've learned so much from the World Cup final. And that's all it's about. It's the hangover from losing that World Cup final and how we went off script and started chucking it around behind our post a bit and made errors, uncharacteristic errors that got us to the final. So, you know, maybe winning it the way we want it is now the kind of monkey off our back now in terms of you can park the World Cup pain. You know, you've gone to the depths of extra time to win something, and yes, it should have been a game that we, you know, should have won convincingly in those 80 minutes, but it's a learning. I think England need to, you look at the players that made an impact. Max Malins, I said it before, Max Malins, Dan Robson, Ben Earl, these are form players in the Premiership. Form players, and there's a fair few others that are in the Premiership playing on form. I'll say it again, Joe Simmons, way better option than George Ford at 10 right now. But will Eddie change his blueprint? I don't think he will.
What did you make of the refereeing?
I thought Andrew Brace refed it well. There weren't any part of me where I'm watching the game thinking he's having a roman at any point. But I did pick up the Billy V knock-on. Now, is that down to Andrew Brace or is that up to the TMO to call that in? I mean, Andrew Brace must have been fucked as well. You think of the amount of running in the game. And I actually love the sudden death thing. I think it's a great concept. I think it's class. I think it actually adds a completely different dimension to rugby. I know we don't see many draws, but if we did, like we saw at the weekend. But have you seen the stuff online? Someone tweeted us about it, Goody. I had a look at some of the stuff. About social media, right? Well, just getting abused. Just saying he's a disgrace and how bad he is. And yeah, it's just like online abuse, as it were. But this is the social media, the dark and the light. Yeah, I mean, there's no place for that. And I'm with you, Jim. He made a couple of errors. Let's not, try and cover up the Billy V knock-on. There was the actual penalty that was reasonably contentious around that led to the kick to the corner that Karolicki scores off. That's actually a knock-on as well, I think. And so, listen, people pick apart little mistakes like that. The knock-on from Billy V was pretty obvious, and the TMO, can he come in and say that's a knock-on? Frank Murphy running the touch, a good friend of ours, where was it? He was probably doing his hair at some point because he looked so good on the touchline. Did Super Frank. They've missed a couple of things, but I didn't think he had a bad performance at all. There was the knock-on that he gave against McAloo from the kickoff, which obviously McAloo doesn't touch, but he's made an instinct call there. Perhaps he should have waved play on, but they're learning lessons, aren't they? And there were no massive calls that he got wrong throughout the whole game. It was just a couple of things like the knock-on's been clear on social media. But there's no place at all for any of the abuse that's received online. You can make comments on people making errors, and this is my big thing about people that come up, people for having an opinion on social media, and we'll get onto that in a bit, or on TV. You're allowed opinions. Don't abuse people, but you're allowed opinions on it. If your opinion is different to the masses, or if your opinion is different to the minority, sometimes you get absolutely hammered. That's where people come into their own on their keyboards and just go too far. And, unfortunately, horrible for Andrew Brace to read stuff like that. And people need to wind their neck in a bit. Does that make us hypocrites?
No,
for not using our fingers, but using our microphones through the audio waves to the millions when we talk about what?
Yeah, we give our opinions, and we're here to give our opinions, but sometimes we do overstep the mark, possibly. But I think some of the actual stuff you read online where it's easy to type and actually personally go into someone that's gone through something pretty tough is horrific. And there's clearly a line. There's, some people call stuff banter. Some people say, it's just a bit of fun and games. And some people call it an opinion. And, you've got to be, in reality, you've got to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm okay with what I'm saying and what I'm tweeting and whatever against someone that's clearly made mistakes.
And they know who we are. And they know who we are. But if you want to come at me when I'm in the car. That's all I'm saying. But if I'm travelling at speed, come at me, because I have the rage. I shouldn't say that. I don't really have the rage when I'm driving. I'm normally listening to podcasts and music. I'm that kind of cultured, chilled individual.
so laid back. I'd like to get your opinion, Jim, on Scotland. And they're coming up short for a third against Ireland. Where are they at right now?
I think we're good. I think we're good. And that's it. I don't think we've got much more in us, really, when you look at the profile of the team compared to that Irish team. For 30 minutes, and again, anyone who watched the game and anyone who's followed social media and the news, and there's a few things that we can talk about it, but for 30 minutes, we look brilliant. We're winning 9 points to 3. Duncan Taylor, Chris Harris in the centres were brilliant. I thought we were really physical in the carry. Ireland looked a little bit shell-shocked. And then there was a yellow card, which is a big talking point in the game, with Duncan Taylor flying out of the line to hit Bundiaki man and ball. I've watched it 100 times. Sometimes I'm thinking, yeah, I can see it. Most of the time I'm not, seeing how Matt Carley's give a yellow card off the back of it. In the lead up to that try, Duncan Taylor's made a couple of other big hits, one on Stockdale, but another one where he's tried to spot Bundiaki as well. And that was a turning point. It just took all the momentum out of the Scotland team. Duncan Taylor, said it on here before, he's a fantastic player. He's borderline in that world class. If he's not injured, he picks up a lot of injuries. In the centre, huge position for Scotland. You're going to struggle against Ireland with 15, or Scotland will anyway. They matched them, but you go down to 14, and then after that, Ireland score a try when Duncan Taylor's off the field, and there's no way back. It seems it just took all the momentum out of them. And what else can you say?
So he's come back on at 11-9. That ain't even game over. Yeah, it seemed that Scotland kind of capitulated in the second half when they had 15 players on the pitch.
It was just a big momentum shift. That's what it was. It was like Scotland were on the front foot for the first 30 minutes. They were banging them in defence, putting them under massive pressure when they were carrying the ball. And like either way, it's not going to be easy. Whatever team we play away from home, if you're playing a top team like Ireland, it ain't going to be easy, is it? And
no.
Like, I don't really know what people are expecting. A little bit of context around it. You look at that Irish team and the experience that they've got. O'Mahony in the back row. I think he's gone to another level for some reason. He's brilliant. CJ Stander. You've got Caleb Doris, who's playing exceptionally well for Leinster week in, week out. We've spoken about James Ryan. A bit of inexperience in the front row. But you look at Conor Murray. You look at Sexton. You look at Earls on the wing. It's like, you look at the profile of that Irish team compared to the Scotland team. We had Jaco van der Walt, who's from the Northern Hebrides with a name like that. Is arguably, he's definitely third choice. They've had to play him instead of Duncan Weir so they can see what he can do going to the Six Nations, because it looks like Finn and Adam Hastings won't be there. But you're without your best player in Finn Russell. So you take an Owen Farrell out of the back line of England. You take
Marrow.
No, that's what I mean. You're taking a top line 10, someone like Finn who can unlock defences, and we spoke about how good defences are. You're struggling, and Hoggy's captain is at 15. You spoke about him last week, and we'll come on to it, and we'll talk about some of the comments that he made after the game and stuff. But it's a difficult one for him. And Stevie Ferris opened him up after the game and said he didn't play well. I don't think he played that bad. I thought he played well when he got the ball in hand. We haven't seen him get the ball in his hand for the whole tournament because no one kicks to him. He actually got a bit of ball in hand and looked dangerous, but there was a couple of errors at the back. And again, playing against a team like Ireland, who are a momentum-based team, it's going to be, it becomes more difficult. But you're going back to your question, Andy Rowe, where Scotland are now, mate, we're all right. Like, we beat France in the
Six Nations. On the way up, or?
I think we're on the way up, but we're going to be going down at some points and then back up, because that's what we are as Scotland. We're not an England, we're not France, we're not an Ireland. we're not New Zealand, South Africa. We haven't got loads of players to choose from who are in the world-class bracket. We've got 2 pro teams, and anyone who's any good in them pro teams ends up having to go because of the amount of money that they need. And then that way it brings on other players. So the model that we've got is working now because we're seeing Scotland develop, but it is what it is. I actually thought we played quite well.
I think the big question is where Jim summed it up perfectly. For 30 minutes, you're in control and playing really well. The difference is when Hoggy says for 70 minutes we control the game, when a lot of people...
I think he said 17. I think he's meant 17.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, Jim summed it up perfectly, and he's convinced me that Scotland are on the right pathway. They've got a hell of a set of players in certain positions, and they're trying to get depth, and they're competing against teams that have got a bigger player pool, and that's where you're at. But it was only a few weeks ago they were saying they'd won 6 on the spin or something. So let's not chuck the baby out with the bathwater. It's a disappointing second half, and that's about it.
Former Ireland head coach Eddie O'Sullivan joins us. How are you, mate?
Good. I've survived.
You've survived.
So far.
Hopefully because you're not on social media. But all I can say is, Eddie, Edinburgh, you're welcome, but I would not go to Glasgow if I was you, mate. There could be a lot of people coming from that way.
I think Scotland in general is off the charts at the moment for me. I'm going to holiday at home this year.
Just blame China off the back of that. Eddie, look, we need to talk about it. It's a good talking point. We were just chatting about Scotland, Ireland. Clearly, there's an emotional attachment to me with the team, and I'm going to keep talking about the team and try to talk them up and give them as much kind of energy as I can, because we need it as a team. What do you make of this Scotland team? Because the comments after that went viral have been quite damning.
Yeah.
The one for me was the deluded notion that we're better than we are, because I don't really get a gauge on that we think that. I think we understate ourselves a lot of the times, but it's interesting to get your perspective. A guy who's coached against them, and you were there pitch side the weekend.
Yeah, and I'd say there's two parts to my statement. One I'll talk to you about now, and one I'll talk to you about after. First thing I said is that I said that Scotland were coming to Dublin. They happened before that they talked themselves up, and then again they imploded. And they had an opinion that they were better than they are, which is harsh, and I accept that. I meant that in the context that I'll take back what in the sense that it probably pissed a lot of people off, and I understand why, because kind of accusing Scotland of being arrogant or ahead of themselves. But my take on Scotland over the years is every time I've been involved in playing Scotland, we've taken Scotland really seriously, because we know that Scotland can turn us over, and Scotland always play Ireland with a view they can get them. And there's no reason they shouldn't do that. But historically, they haven't done that. It's a bad history against Ireland. And I say that in the context of the last 20 years. And the 20 years before, the shoe was completely on the other foot. Like, we couldn't beat Scotland at anything. And so there was an element of that in it. And yeah, I would say in retrospect, it was a very harsh thing to say. And I wasn't trying to insult anybody. I probably did. And I over-egged the pudding on that point, I would say. Yeah, I can't say for sure Scotland talked themselves up too much, or they're arrogant or ahead of themselves. But I do know Scotland always fancy their chances against Ireland. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the facts of the matter is it rarely works out for them. And it's hard to take away from that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And what I did like then is you mentioned pudding, and I can't wait for mine tonight. But the question is, to me, was it a bit of a reaction from Stuart Hogg's interview saying
it was,
that he said they controlled the game for 70 minutes? And Hoggy's coming off the back of a performance where he's out of breath, he's devastated, and sometimes you haven't got a clear mind then, have you?
That's the second point, Andy, I want to make. Is I stand over what I said about Stuart. I thought Stuart was a bit delusional, and that's where the delusion bit came in. He said two things that I disagree with vehemently. One is they dominated the game, he didn't say it. He said it suggested they were in a position to dominate the game for, we're splitting hairs for 70 minutes, which I think was complete nonsense.
He meant 17. He just said it wrong. It's a borders thing.
He should have, because the truth of the matter is, I thought they were super for the first 20, 25 minutes. I thought they were really starting to cause problems for Ireland. But I thought that was a bad take. And then he said, which I thought is they're on the cusp of something. They're or how do you frame it again? That there were something big going to happen. And again, like, fair is fair. He can say that and he can think that, but I'm saying, where's the evidence for that? And I don't think there's any evidence for that at the moment. for Scotland. I think Scotland are improving, but when you say something big, do you mean a Grand Slam or a Six Nations title? And I don't see that on the cards for them at the moment. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think, to me, that was the delusional bit, really, you know. And I did go over the top on the other stuff, and I didn't want to upset anyone. I'm sure I did, and I got huge abuse in the weekend on social media, and I probably deserve some of it. But the notion that they were in charge for 70 minutes is claptrap, and I don't see anything major for Scotland at the moment, because I analysed them before the game. I sat down and I looked at Scotland's last 3 games, and as my coaching hat on, I said, how would I attack Scotland here if I want to get them? And the thing that surprised me is they played the same defence they've played for the last 3 games and again last spring, which is not a difficult defence to crack. I thought they should have come out and blitzed the crap out of Ireland, which England and France do, and Ireland are in a place at the moment they can't cope with that. So they came out and they played the same defence. They got opened up a good bit. And I just don't agree with Stuart on that point. And he could prove me wrong, and fair play if he does. I'll put my hand up.
We kind of did blitz them, though. Donkey Taylor blitzed out the line to try and hit Bundy Aki and was yellow carded off the back of that. What do you make of that yellow card, then? Let's talk a little bit
I
about that.
thought it was bullshit. No, I thought it was a knock-on, actually, to be front with you. I thought Aki passed the ball into his hand. He was always trying to make a tackle. He was trying to make the smarter tackle, you know, man and ball. And Aki passed the ball into his hand. It was a smart thing to do. But it was a knock-on. I don't think there was any intent to slap that ball down.
Yeah, and we know that, yeah.
No, I don't think it was a yellow card. I said at the time, I thought it was BS, you know. No, yeah. Look, it doesn't be hard on the referees make these calls. But at the moment, they're kind of almost looking for the yellow card on those plays. Not all those plays are as sinister as they're made out to be. Guys generally know if you try to that, you're in trouble. So most guys try and avoid it. Shit happens, but, you know, I thought it was yellow. I didn't think it was a yellow card. I thought a knock-on would have been okay by me.
But that's the point on that, though, Eddie. You're a coach, or have been a coach as well. With your coaching hat on, if that's one of your players, when you're making a tackle, and this is one of the things that I'm, you know, watching the game now as opposed to playing it. When you're making a tackle and you're trying to make a big hit, a lot of the time you've got your arm sort of just behind your shoulder, ready to swing into a tackle and make a connection around the back. What Donkey Taylor's done wrong is he's led with his hand, right? So as he's led with his hand, he's got no momentum from that shoulder, and it blocks the pass. So would you not be coaching? You shouldn't be leading with your hand in a tackle. You lead with your shoulder, which means you're not going to get the knock-on.
Great question. Because I said to Stephen Farrell, I said, that was a lose-lose. He leads with his arm, it's a yellow card. He doesn't lead with his arm, it's a yellow card for a shoulder charge.
Yeah, but you can then wrap, can't you? So you know, big shot tackle, you hit with your shoulder, then wrap afterwards. That's the way.
Yeah, but if he leaves his arm behind him on contact, he's going to be sent off. So he got his arm up like you do, and he knocked the ball down doing that. So, and the no arms tackle thing is like, if you drop your shoulder into somebody, if you're trying to get your arms up and you make contact, I think once your arms are up, you're depowered your shoulders. They need to look at that again. But I think he was a lose-lose scenario Saturday. He got a yellow card for putting his arm up, and if he kept it down, he would have a yellow card for shoulder charge. And I'm not. That's something that the referee is kind of following direction on. I'm not trying to jump on the referee, but it's an area that's like, let's say that was a situation where there was a 1-point game at the end of the day, we'd be citing that as the difference in the team. So it didn't turn out that way. But that's a problem, I think. Yeah, they're so kind of geared to look for the slap down or the knockdown that they're picking those cards out of their pocket very early. I'd have looked at it again and said, look, I think the guy had no intention of knocking the ball down. It happened, but I don't think a yellow card was right there. In fact, for me, I think it was more like a knock-on than a penalty. But look, it's done now.
Just going back to what you said about the Scottish defence, what is it about that Scottish defence that they've been doing for so long, and what is it that makes it so easy for you to see how to attack it? Yeah,
the Scottish defence is unusual because it's kind of a retro defence. It's what we used to call a 3.5. It's a very aggressive defence. So on the first pass, they launch really hard. And then on the second pass, they try to drift. It's a very hard thing to do. I mean, I think the idea is if you launch early on the first pass, maybe the attacking team feel the pressure and they chicken out and they go into contact. So what you do against that defence, and Ireland did it in the spring as well, not as much last weekend, but they did very well in the spring, is that you throw the first pass and you pull them up. And then you throw the second pass goes behind the front runners or the spot players. So you can hit those guys up into it a couple of times, just to, let them know it's coming. And then you go out the back. And if you are that outside guy on that kind of first step and you've got to turn and you're running up hard, you can't turn. You just can't turn. It's just, you can't get off the line like a rocket on the first step and then suddenly turn and go outfield. You can, but you're compromised. So that spot play out the back is really easy to break down that defence. It means those inside guys get locked in. And they got locked in against Italy. I looked at that game on the Italy game. They got locked in a few times. They got locked in against France. So they need to look at that defence and say, if teams are going to, I'm happy to play that against that defence any day. You just send those front runners up, hit them up a couple of times to soften them up, and then out the back, and they won't get turned that corner as quickly as they think, and they get caught in the corners then. And that's why it's a defence I don't mind playing against if you're smart enough to use those players.
Yeah, because the last thing I want to ask you on Scotland then, your coaching record against Scotland was 100% win success in the Six Nations.
Well, I lost the game, World Cup warm-up, friendly.
Well, Six Nations never lost. Those warm-ups don't count. But one of the questions
they do. I think I played. They count.
One of the things I wanted to ask, you said you always took Scotland really seriously. How could you take Scotland seriously with Jim Hamilton in the second row when you coached against him? I just can't work that one out.
Because, Eddie, I'm going to answer this, because that thing you just mentioned about where you've got to turn the corner and be able to catch up with the attackers. There was only one man in the team who could do that, and it was cover tackle Jim Hamilton. That was why he took it seriously.
Well, I was secretly ringing the Scotland coach and making sure Jim was on the team. That was what happened there.
Yeah. One last question, Eddie, from my perspective on Scotland, because I played for 10 years for Scotland. As a player, I was talking about the same things. This is our year. We're developing. We're getting better. We're getting a bigger pool of players that can play international rugby. We're now years since I retired, and we're still hearing the same kind of messages. When you look at it, because I thought it was interesting, because arguably if France hadn't come as good as they have done, I would have said in the next couple of years, potentially Scotland have got the opportunity to win the Six Nations. But I think you think differently. I think, look, if we are speaking candidly, if we look at the performance of the weekend, we might struggle over the next couple of years. We managed to pull big performances out of the bag, like we beat South Africa in recent years, Australia.
The thing is, you've got to judge this on consistency. Ireland were like that go back 20 years. We would win now and again, and we would celebrate the hell out of it. But when you look at our record over time, like Ireland and Scotland are, in the Six Nations over 21 years, are 30%. That's losing 7 out of 10. That's a hard statistic.
Jim's was 16% when he played.
I thought it was 23, but I'll take 16, 23, add them together.
Like the breakdowns on the Six Nations are, the best team in the Six Nations over 21 years are England, 75%.
You're welcome.
Ireland are Wales are 65, Ireland 64, France are only 52 because they had a horrible noughties. They had a horrible early teens here. They had a good noughties and a horrible early teens. They're only 52% since 2010. They're getting better though. That's going to change. Scotland are about 32% and Italy are 17%. So the consistency you're talking about there, Jim, yeah, I think realistically, and I there's a few things I know about Irish rugby that are different for Scottish rugby, which I think has made a difference to us. I know in Scotland that the schools game has kind of evaporated, so everything goes through the club system. I know for a fact in Ireland, we're very lucky. We've got a very strong school system. Our school system in Ireland is world class. We can play England, New Zealand, it doesn't matter. We're in that bracket. We've got a very strong age grade system as well. And for that reason, we get a really good cherry pick into our academies. And our academies over the last 10 years, they were only starting out when I was coaching Ireland, they've become highly efficient. So if you look at the Irish under-20 coach every year, he's an abundance of players to pick from. And the under-20s in Ireland, if you look, have really done well over the last few years. They've been right out there, thereabouts. That's because the school system is really shoving them through. The academy system is picking them up. And basically the competition now to get into professional squads around is very high. So it goes back to that. I know Scotland, to be fair to Scotland, they don't have that sort of resources on the grass, on the ground. I think losing the schools game was a huge stagger in the heart of Scotland. That's going back, 20 years more, I don't know. But that's going to manifest. we in Ireland are lucky. Like, the strength of Leinster is the quality of the Leinster schools rugby. You look at those kids playing in 17, 18, for their age, they're world class. And then they scramble to get into these academies. And even then, if they don't get into the Leinster Academy, they're happy to go to the Munster Academy or the Ulster Academy. They just want in. So, to be fair to Scotland, it's a tough hill to climb. We've been lucky in Ireland that we're feeding off what goes on at the age grade level, and there's a good, I suppose, conveyor belt of talent coming through every year. But having said that, we don't maybe have the major depth then that France or England might have with their numbers. Like, we're just being able to service it pretty well at the moment. And again, you know, Ireland could slip back, but I'd be honest and say I think we can sustain probably just below the very top tier. And if we get a good vintage of players, like over a 5-year period, we could be playing at the top tier. So that's how we're hanging in there. And I've been critical of Ireland this year in particular. We had a sloppy Six Nations, you know. We struggled mightily against France and England because they played an up and in against us, and we haven't figured out how to crack that. And you know, that's a different discussion. We're not talking about Ireland, but yeah, I think Ireland are hanging in there, and a good vintage, they can get up there and fight it out with the top teams, and then maybe there's a cycle they drop back. But our expectation in Ireland, ridiculously, is very high. Like, I remember when I got involved in Ireland, we beat England once. They were going for a Grand Slam in Dublin, and we beat them. They hadn't played for 3 months. It was a foot and mouth year. And like, we thought we had, you know, just won the World Cup because we beat England in Dublin. But that's changed for Ireland. We are more consistent. I think that's the big difference for us. We're consistent. Like, again, 64% over the last 20 years in Six Nations is a pretty good innings, you know. So I think there's a reason for it.
Yeah, and I can see where you mean, but let's talk about Ireland then, because, and especially playing against England, we've seen over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, there's clearly a mental block around the physicality, around you know, what England can do to Ireland. Yeah, Ireland can do that to Scotland and can do it to other teams, as we saw at the weekend, the physicality that they bring. Is there some sort of mental block there? Is it just a pure physicality thing? Because there clearly is an issue at the minute when Ireland play.
I have this kind of thing in my head that, as a coach coaching Ireland, that I don't think we've got some good athletes, but we're not at that caliber of athlete across the field. We are going to have 1 or 2 guys, maybe 3 or 4 that can mix it with England or France, but they're going to have more of those guys than we are. So I've always felt when you play a team like France or a team like England, you've got to box really clever. You can't go toe to toe. You're a middleweight and a heavyweight boxing match, and if you go toe to toe, the odds are you're going to end up on your butt, you know. So I've always come at it like that. Try and play them where they're going to struggle most. And I always felt against England, and we weren't always successful. We moved the ball as much as we could away. We made them work around the field. And England gave us, when I was coaching, gave us space on the corners, and we took it. The moment what England and France, and this is across the board, I watched Southern Hemisphere as well. The teams that blitz up very well on the up and in, a lot of teams are struggling. We saw it in the World Cup. Like, England beat the All Blacks. The All Blacks couldn't find a way through or around that up and in. I think in the final, apart from the scrum, which was a big talking point, obviously, is that South Africa did that to England as well. Like, the moment you watch it, the more teams are going to gravitate to the up and in because more teams are struggling against it. And until somebody cracks this and says, this is how you're cracking up and in, and everyone goes, oh, light bulb moment, then the up and in will struggle. And people have to adapt again. But at the moment, Ireland have struggled against that because we don't know how to break the up and in at the moment. I have opinions on how you do it. That's a different discussion. But that up and in defence is smothering a lot of teams around the world at its work. So it's all, you know, it's always easy to play without the ball than it is with the ball. So if you can be smart without the ball, it can make it very difficult to play with the ball. And the up and in at the moment is causing lots of problems. That's why I was surprised Scotland didn't go up and in on the weekend against Ireland. They just should have taken a part of it and see how Ireland reacted, because Ireland have struggled manfully against that defence this year already, you know.
We'll save your ideas to how you can play against it, because I could make you millions over the next couple of years if you have got the code that can crack it. That brings me on to the next point around Andy Farrell. I always find it really interesting. Me and Goody have spoken about, maybe not as much on here. When you're an international coach, it hardly ever ends well. So you're going out for all glory, right? You know, with an Ireland and England, and you have moments where you win things. But the minute you don't, You very rarely get
high-jump competition. You end up knocking the bar. Just how high can you get it before you knock it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So with this Ireland team under Andy Farrell, from what the kind of superficial research and what I hear, it seems like he's under a little bit of pressure to do something more than kind of what's being done now. Is that what's happening in Ireland? Is there a bit of pressure?
Yeah, I think he's under pressure, and it's a contextual pressure. Okay, and let me explain that to you. He took over from Joe Schmidt, who was hugely successful, was our most successful head coach in the history of Irish rugby. Extraordinary success. But at the end of the day, Joe's style of coaching became problematic for the player group. It was so granular, so detailed, so pressurized. And there was a sense that guys stopped enjoying playing, even though they were having a fairly good success. I think Andy was on deck for a lot of that, saw that dynamic working, and he came in and he wanted a move away from that. He wanted to move away to a more relaxed approach, more ball in hand, more kind of players making on their own decisions. So it's complete, let's say, philosophical swing away from where Joe was. Now, I think the opinion is, and I would agree with this, is that he probably has swung the pendulum too far the other way. Plus the fact he's coaching a huge number of players that were used to playing under Joe, where the level of detail was incredibly granular. So he's got to find a balance here, where the players have a clearer vision of what they want, and he gives them a little more latitude to play. It seems very nuanced, but at international level, nuances make a big difference. And the other thing then, how that has manifested itself, which has put him under a bit of pressure, is that the major pillars of our game have creaked at some point along the way each game this year, really. Like the lineouts creaked in games. Other games, the scrum has creaked. Other games, our defence has been... Like our defence against France in the last Six Nations game was unbelievably bad. I mean, just catastrophic. And then we've got... The ruck has become a problem now. We've got turned over... I think up to the last weekend, I don't know the stats for Saturday, but we got turned over an average of about 7 times a game at the breakdown. So nothing's malfunctioned, like nothing's worked perfectly every day. There's always been something going wrong. And that's created a narrative around the team, like why is the ruck going wrong? Why is the lineup going wrong? And I think he's probably need to take a breath here before the Six Nations, because if the Six Nations goes on, like we said, the last Six Nations in the autumn, he will come under more pressure. It's just those inconsistencies in different parts of the game over different days. And then the 2 big games, obviously, for us are Wales and England and France. And we've been pretty abysmal in those games. We have really underperformed. And that sets the tone around the team. So I think maybe he's got to find that balance. I honestly think he's probably gone from where Joe was in terms of that huge attention to detail and stressing the smallest kind of granular where your foot is in a rock, or where you tie your lace almost, gone to look, let's see what you think is going to happen here. He's got to find something in the middle that works for him and works for players.
Well, you can see that with Caelan Doris, is an interview at the end of the game. He said that we're enjoying playing the game, so that kind of backs up what you're saying. Completely.
But again, but Doris is new into that setup. He hasn't really been in the Joe Schmidt regime. And let's be honest, Joe was incredibly successful with that regime of very strict adherence to plans and strategies and roles at every moment in the game. But I think that weighed heavily on the players too. And maybe people would say when they got to the World Cup, it was weighing too heavily on them. And they never kind of blossomed out of it. And look, I think Andy's got to, I think, winning on the weekend, the win always takes the pressure off. He's got to kind of have a think over Christmas and say, look, I need to find this balance where we go out and the key pillars of our game are functional every week. We can't have a bad day at the line out and then the next day have a bad day at the rock. We've got to get that consistency, but still give the players breathing space to play like I want them to play. So I think he's in that process at the moment. But again, he's being measured against Joe Schmidt. That's the problem as well. That doesn't help him.
No, and I love the way you said he's got to think over Christmas about rugby, because all I ever think over Christmas is how much to eat and drink. But one of the things you mentioned around the players and the kind of different styles of coaching leads me as an ex-fly half to understand that there is more pressure on a 10 when it's over to the players to make all these decisions.
Sure.
And there's been a load of chat in the press, hasn't there, around Johnny Sexton, his age, his form, other guys coming through, Billy Burns, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Where do you think Johnny Sexton sits right now in terms of that? Is he under huge pressure? I know he's captain, but are these questions just coming from outside Ireland, or is it actually, Jim wants Jim wants him retired next week, I think.
There's been discussions here. Look, Johnny said he wants to go for the next World Cup, and fair play to him. I have no problem with a guy having that ambition. Will he make it is another question. There's two parts to this discussion. One is him as a player, and I still think he's the best 10 in Ireland at the moment. I think the one guy who might have really put the shivers up his spine is Joey Carberry, but he's been injured since the last World Cup. Carberry's a special talent, but he's not playing. There's thoughts that maybe his injury is a lot more serious than we know, that he's struggling to come back. But he's the guy to me. All the other guys are not on Sexton's level. Maybe someone could get there, but they might get the opportunity. And Sexton is an important figure in the team. He's a leader. He's a tough guy. The guy that drives everybody on. He's that. The captaincy side of it is interesting because James Ryan got the captaincy for the game in Twickenham. And I thought maybe that's a passing of the baton here. That, James is... And I think James Ryan is captain material. There's no doubt he's going to captain Ireland at some point. But Johnny took over again. Now, James had a tough day in Twickenham, not like the other 14 guys on the field. But having said that, Andy might have to think about, look, will Johnny actually make the next World Cup? He might not. He's getting dinged up as well. He went off again on the weekend with a groin or a hammer, So it's 4 years, 3 more years on the track. So that's the dilemma for him is, should he just give the captaincy to James Ryan and say, like, you're my man till the next World Cup. You're going to be there. You're first on the team sheet. And Ryan has all the captaincy boxes ticked, to be fair to him. And then say, Johnny, focus on your game. Play as 10 as long as you can. And if someone beats you out, good enough, they don't, you're going to be there. And I think that might be a good way to let Johnny refocus on his game and staying healthy and let someone else take the pressure of the captaincy. But that's up to Andy to call. I don't know what he'll do, but I think there is a question about Johnny going to the next World Cup because of longitude. But at the moment, I still think he's the best 10 for Ireland. Under pressure, the chips are down. Yeah, you'd want them there. Anything else, it's going to be a bit dodgy. And maybe Carberry comes back and really ramps it up because, to be fair, Carberry is the real deal, I think, as well.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that, definitely. You sound very passionate about the game still. I know you're doing a lot of TV work as well. You've got a fantastic coaching history. Have you got the passion to still get in the game, or you can see the detail that you go into? Is that purely based around the interest of the game on television, or do you want to get back into coaching? I'd
love to coach, yeah, but I think one of the problems I had is people saw me as a head coach, and I've been a head coach, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's called head coach for a reason. You get a lot of headaches. I actually would love to be an assistant coach and focus on attack or defence or some strategy. So I would like to, but that's about opportunity. It's like being an actor waiting for the phone to ring and someone give you a movie. But yeah, I would. But I still love the game. I still follow it. I still watch games with notebooks in front of me and take notes. And there's 3 categories. Like, that was a really crappy idea. Like, what were they thinking? And that was a really good idea, but maybe they could nudge it. If they did this, might be better. And the third category is, fuck, why didn't I think of that? So you like that. That's the way I think. So I love innovation, and I probably the thing that I would love to see in the game more is more innovation. Like, the one thing we see at the moment, guys, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, is that we all know how teams are going to exit. Like, they're going to. You can see the guys at the back of the ruck piling up, and he rolls the ball back to halfback and he pumps the contestable. Or the game is getting a wee bit predictable. Everyone's playing the same shape at the moment practically. There's 1-3-3-1. There's a lot of dependence on somebody making a defensive error, like England did against France. They made a defensive error. They didn't, and the score came. It didn't. Jalabert took it brilliantly. Like, he's a class act, but he shouldn't have got the opportunity if people stayed to their roles. So I'd love to see more teams innovating and unpicking defences, asking questions of defences that defence are really struggling to answer. I think the more of that we do in the game, the better the product will be for everybody. But I just worry at the moment that there's a lot of risk-adverse rugby being played. A lot of kicking, a lot of the aerial ping pongs come back in, especially this autumn for some strange reason. And teams are playing very much the same type of style of rugby. And the collisions in the game are just getting more frequent and heavier. That's another discussion. But yeah, from my own perspective, I just love watching the game and I love analysing it. I'm 62 now and I've been doing it for 50 years, so probably not going to give up.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, mate, and best of luck with that new coaching gig, whatever it may be, whenever it may be.
Well, listen, it's great to talk rugby, guys. I love it. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Top bloke. You can't say it. You can't say it.
Good of him for it to come on. I think he's redeemed himself. He's backtracked on his comments, which is all that I was looking for. But again, not again. How Irish is he? I don't want to stereotype. How Irish?
Yeah, mate, he is. And do you know what? It's the detail that he's going in there. You can tell, and he said it himself. He sat watching games with his notepad, desperate to still coach, isn't he? But fair play to him. Come on. It's one of those things, right? You look at a lot of, and I saw this on social media at the weekend, you look at a lot of interaction, right? And the pundits that are on and all this stuff. And someone that makes a comment like someone that makes a comment like Eddie O'Sullivan did, it just divides opinion. So all the Scots are going mad, Irish people are agreeing, English people are sat there going, oh, well, not really bothered, but yeah, because it's Scotland, we'll just agree. And, it creates debate, but people don't like it. You go to football, who are the best?
Gary Neville, when he abuses Man United.
Mate, Gary Neville gives an opinion. Roy Keane gives his strong opinion. These pundits that are doing that, Jamie Carragher as well, same, gives strong opinions on stuff, and it creates debate, and that's what you want. People get offended when it's just a bit bland. You've taken offence by what you said, Jim.
I haven't taken offence at all.
Yeah, I am bothered. I'm not bothered. I'm not taking offence.
I'm bothered.
But it's great for the game. You want these people to have a strong opinion on genuinely what they believe in, and be able to debate it and discuss it. I think that's what we do on here, and it's important that you're not just bland and say, yeah, it was a good game, and let's agree with Eddie Jones because we're winning. Let's pick things. Let's pick holes in things because we want the game to be better. We want.
All right, Owen Farrell was shy at the weekend.
There you go.
Is that what else you want?
Yeah, mate, you do it. You go for it.
Do you want some more?
I want some more.
Johnny Sexton's too old to play the game now. He's
you're horrible.
Every single game.
More. Keep going.
Alan Wynne Jones with Wales. Italy should have beat them. Italy should have beat them at the weekend. Do you want more?
No chance. Yeah, more.
Yes, keep going.
Okay, Brian O'Driscoll, you're having it, mate, because you've called me out on Twitter saying about Scotland getting 50 on them. No, that was me saying that to you, didn't reply, so you're having it, mate.
Well, let's get your take on the other couple of games in the Autumn Nations Cup now. But before we do, we've teamed up with Level Rugby this week to give you guys a 15% discount site-wide across a wide range of boots, replica and training wear. Make sure you use the code RugbyPod15 to get some great discounts on all the brand new international ranges worn in the Nations Cup. Just head to level-rugby.co.uk to check it all out and enter the code RugbyPod15 for 15% off. How good was it to see Fiji back out there, boys?
Class.
Oh my God. Amazing. And the Rugby Pod hoodoo, whatever you want to call it, the spell that we cast on
the non-curse.
It's back. It is back because Nandolo comes on. First game back for Fiji, scores a hat-trick. Thank you very much. Nemani Nandolo, Fiji Rugby, you are welcome.
You called it. You actually said, can you imagine playing them after they've been locked up, they won't let me out, Akon sang in 2007. But it might have been before that. It might have been 1999. But class. How good. Seeing Fiji.
Yeah.
The gutting thing about it is, and a few people have spoken about it, is that we just didn't get to see them anymore, really.
Yeah.
I think, for me, with the coaching team that they got in place and with some of the players, especially in that back line, where's the long-term opportunity for Fiji? This is what needs to be looked at. Is it in the Championship? Probably not, because the geographic nature of where the players play, a lot of them play in Europe, it's going to be more difficult to get them down there. Is there an opportunity for them to play in the Six Nations? Is this Autumn Nations Cup a thing every year? So I just think that in terms of Fiji's development, but also taking the game forward, a lot of people are talking about how bland the game is now. We've spoken about it on here, the amount of kicking. If you want to not watch a bland game, watch Fiji play. They were brilliant at the weekend against a very physical and a team like Georgia who've got better and better week on week. But it was class. So Nemani Nandola, I saw his interview after the emotion, touching the Fijian badge after the game, how much it meant to him. So it was class, absolutely class to watch them. I was well happy.
Yeah, it was great. And you look at across that back line and a lot of the forward play. And Jim's right. I think World Rugby now need to find somewhere for a Fiji to be in a competition. And you look across the back line, Tuisova playing in France. You've got Nandolo playing in England. You've got Vola playing in France. Bottia playing in France. Murray Marivalu playing in England. It's a lot of Northern Hemisphere based stuff because naturally that's where the money is. And Australia, New Zealand, and the teams down there, they allow some of them to play, but then they ship them out because they're all about pushing their own players, the Australians and the New Zealanders, to play for their country. So the natural progression is to go to Japan or to come to the UK or to go to France where the money is. So I think World Rugby, and we've seen what Dan Leo has put out with his documentary, there needs to now be serious conversations around what Jim said then, the Autumn Nations Cup. Is it something that happens every autumn? Well, we know next year it's not going to because they've announced the fixtures that certain countries are going to play. But Fiji need regular competitive competition rugby because they are a star quality team when they've got all their boys together in an international window.
Can you imagine if Fiji got an influx of money with not individual players? We know that some of them are the highest paid players in the world, and they send money back to Fiji, send money back to their family to build infrastructure and all these things that we know, which is great. Can you imagine if Fiji as a union actually got the money, everything was done properly, and they were building academies and they were building rugby centres out there? Speaking to Eddie O'Sullivan about what the infrastructure they've got in Ireland. Imagine Fiji if they had that and they had proper academies. It'd be class.
But this is one for you. A lot of the French clubs have got academies out in Fiji.
Clermont have.
Clermont have, Brive have. They've got academies out in Fiji to get players like Aliverti Raka, who's Fijian. Oh, he's awesome. Let's get him over to France, and then he becomes French. So that's part.
Is that the right way?
Well, I mean, I can't begrudge someone for doing it because it's their lifestyle, it's their career, it's earning way more money than they would do if they're playing for Fiji. But that's where World Rugby need to step in. And I know they've changed the. And you're talking about certain players. Scotland had a couple of South Africans playing, didn't they? England have got project players as well. So have Wales, so have Ireland. That's the big question. I know it's been extended to 5 years now, residency, but the only way to protect players is to make it an 8-year residency, a double World Cup cycle, and that will actually protect the players that are Fijian that want to just play for Fiji. And World Rugby need to support that and monetize it to allow them to not want to look at other countries and other opportunities. Of course, for a rugby contract week to week for a club, go and do that, but you want to be playing for the country, and that's down to World Rugby. Make it an 8-year residency or 9 to make it 2 World Cup cycles. So it's pretty much impossible to then, you'll only play for the country of your birth.
Well, a couple of countries that may be good to have a Fiji academy in would be Wales and Italy. They fought out a pretty game on the weekend, boys.
I thought Italy might do it.
Yeah, I Jim as well. Yeah, I mean, like you were about to say, they were winning 18-17 at half time.
Imagine.
They could have done. If it weren't for Faletau and Tipperick, arguably.
How good was Faletau?
That's the best I've seen him play in years.
Yeah.
So that's class for him. Of course, smart. He's probably out of contract as well. Smart.
He is at Bath. I think he's out of contract.
I thought he was going to get to England as well, to be fair. We spoke about that.
It was.
But 38 points to 18. Is that a reflection on the game? I don't know. That maybe just shows where Italy are. And I say that, again, superficially, because it's easy to throw stuff like that about. But watching the highlights and watching it back, because there's a lot of talk about Italy, isn't there, whether or not they should be in the Six Nations, but I think they're all right as well. I'm just so positive about it. But you're all right. You can't get beat all the time, can you? So where's the turning point for the Italian team? But a lot of talk around Wales. Again, how good are they? How good aren't they? Massive. I mean, they beat Italy by 20 points. So on paper, it looks pretty good. But again, they need to be better. But they're a team in transition, as we know. So
and they've had some injuries, and they're starting to get some boys back from injury as well, which has had a big impact. And again, you're comparing it to England. England haven't had any injuries, apart from Manu Tuolangi, really, to their frontline team. And then when you've got a depth of player talent and the player pool that England have got, it doesn't really matter if some players are injured. Whereas in Wales and in Scotland and sometimes in Ireland, you take out those first 2-3 top-tier players, and then the next guys aren't anywhere near as good. And I mean that fully respectfully. So Wales' time, I think, will come again. You know, massive Six Nations come up for them. If they don't perform reasonably well in the Six Nations, then, you know, Pivac's gone. Horrible, Jim, you're horrible.
But they'll have no Lions. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it, Goody.
Pivac didn't really endear himself to the regions of the clubs, did he? Saying that his players came into the tournament a little bit unfit.
I saw Josh Adams' comments around that. Again, what's fit? You know, is it test match fit? Is it Andy Good fit when you're out of breath, put your shoes on? Like what? Define fitness. Is that down to the regions? Is that down to the players? Is it a style of rugby that Wales want to play? Like, at the minute, I don't really understand, or I can't see an identity to how they're playing. So it's a comment Josh Adams made. He looks fit to me. He's been playing all right for Cardiff. But we will say, like Goody said, the Six Nations is a big one for them. And it's a Lions year, so you're expecting some of them players to front up because it's something that they've always done. And yeah, I want to see Wales be good, and I think they will be again in 2050. So horrible. I don't mean to be. I love Wales.
You're so horrible, Jim.
I absolutely love Wales. I do. I promise.
Let's have a look at the Premiership. What happened to Wasps, Scooty?
Oh my word,
mate! Newcastle, one of my old clubs. 3 from 3. Let's just talk about Newcastle. I set the foundations. Jim said it's all about foundations, right? You lay the foundations and then there's just improvement off the back of what you've left behind. And Newcastle, 3 from 3 in the Premiership. I think they listened to the podcast a few weeks ago when Jim abused them about losing to the Ealing Trailblazers. And they've come out, and fair play to Newcastle, right? They've played 3 games. They've played 3 of the teams that were in the top 4 about a month ago in the Premiership. So they dusted Bath first game, they dusted Sale second game, and they dusted Wasps third game. And actually, their best performance was against Wasps at the Ricoh Arena.
Of course it was. Of course they were the very best that day.
Well, no, I'm going to be honest, Jim. Wasps were garbage. There you go.
Why?
How about that?
Why?
No Launchbury, no Willis, no Robson. Sopawanga threw an intercept. He's back to his old ways. Yeah, it's just... listen, let's just talk about Newcastle. Fekitoa was not playing, no.
Oh, my quads. I saw a picture of him on Instagram. My word. He definitely wasn't playing.
And what's in between his quads? Something else that's pretty big too.
I've seen the picture. My goodness, mate.
So fair play to Newcastle. 3 from 3. It's a hell of a start for them.
My Quins dominated Gloucester. And
your Quins.
My Quins. Fair play. Fair play. They look very good. 14 men as well.
Yeah. Esther Hazelwood sent off.
Was that a red card? Was it that bad?
He's elbowed him in the head, mate.
Did he elbow or did he lean on him? I mean,
he's given it a little elbow to the face, mate. You just can't.
He's a harlequin. He should be banned for 20 weeks for that. Marcus Smith, very good. He's a front foot player, isn't he?
He is a front foot player, but he has got and he's learned a hell of a lot under Nick Evans. And one thing I'm going to throw out there. Charlie Hodgson is a top point scorer in the Premiership with about 2,000 gazillion points, however many it is. I'm second, about 300 behind Charlie Hodgson. I'm telling you that Marcus Smith will break the record. He'll take Charlie Hodgson's record. He'll go past me and then go past Charlie because he's 21 and he is scoring boatloads of points week in, week out. He is a fantastic rugby player at a very, very young age. You'd look at his attacking intent. I know he's been involved with the England squad. I don't want to say it again, but George Ford, how's he still getting picked when you've got players like Joe Simmons and Marcus Smith playing week in, week out exceptionally well? He's got everything, Marcus Smith. He puts it in defence as well. If you watch him, it's not like a young kid who you're trying to hide in defence with certain players. I used to try and hide in defence a lot. Cipriani hides in defence. Marcus Smith makes his tackles. And he's got, an all-court game. He's got a brilliant kicking game, vision, the X factor, the pace. He's fantastic.
And he's resilient as well, because I'm sure he's going to be pissed off that he weren't in the England squad. And you're watching your team not playing that well. Again, something you joke about Goody every week. Harlequin's being shit. And
That's you.
Oh, is it? And to be fair, in the shadows of a tournament, he's rocking up away from home. Gloucester, good win last week, and with 14 men, it was like the old Cipriani show with the way that he played. Little chips over the top, show and goose. I thought they looked good. And with Don Brandt as well. I don't know if he's a test date, but he's a bloody good player. Scored a couple of tries as well. So, I mean,
he's also
Gloucester? You go.
With Don Brandt, he's also that player that is always, like Sam Simmons, scoring 6 tries in 3 games for Exeter. He's always scoring tries, so he's making things happen. Don Brandt is always there sniffing out opportunities. And that's a player, you go back to Nick Easter when he was at Harlequins, those sort of players that are always in and around the action at the right sort of time to make something happen. And Don Brandt as an 8 is one of those. So, does he fit into Eddie Jones's thinking? Well, clearly not at the minute, because he played Curry there and he's got Ben Earl in the squad, and obviously Billy's the starter, and people are chomping at the bit to get Sam Simmons in as well. But listen, Quinn's played from their, let's be honest, from their brutal first game. I was going to call it a shit show in the first game against Exeter, but they were pretty poor in that first game. They bounced back, spanked Northampton away from home, spanked Gloucester away from home. And maybe this year, maybe now Robshaw's gone, they're the real deal, Jim. Why do you say that, mate? You're horrible. You are horrible, Jim.
I do want to say, because I like Guzzy, that I do hope that it's a turning point for them now, Robshaw. I mean, so now Marlon's within that. Look, it's a turning point for Quinns. All right. We've seen it. And Gloucester, my goodness me.
Relegated, Gloucester?
They won't be far off, will they?
Oh, mate, why have you been horrible against them?
Honestly, mate, best policy. Just claim stupidity, which I do regularly, every day.
Any other games you catch your eye on the weekend, boys?
Watch the highlights of the Leicester Exeter. All I'm saying is, my 2-on-1 is what I'm getting from that. I thought Leicester looked all right. We looked quite physical, but when you play against Exeter, you don't want them in your half, and you do not want them 5 metres close to your line. Jack Yendall, my old tap and go, there you go. He basically walks over the try line and then into the bar at the back of the stadium. It's probably closed. You're not allowed to drink, or can you drink? It's what tier are they in? I don't even know. And driving line out, physicality, Exeter do what Exeter did. But I think Leicester looks a lot better apart from that. Did you see that 2-on-1? And
I mean,
what about Wiggy? What about Wiggy Wood?
So Zach Henry's broken through. What I don't get is he's broken through, and it looked like he was just going to stop and draw the guy and just pass it to Wiggy, who would have been under the sticks. You're losing 21-13, and maybe it's a sign of inexperience. And I don't want to hammer him too much, Zach Henry, because he's playing reasonably well. He's first big steps into the game.
He is a good player.
Yeah, he's got a good skill set, but that's the sort of thing that he used to probably do at a much lower level and still score the try. And now you're talking Premiership, top tier, you're talking playing the champions. And Richard Wigglesworth, went absolutely ballistic at him. He's gone bananas. Zach, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me?
As his teeth fall out. Because he's nearly 50.
Yeah, Wiggy was absolutely raging.
Europe starting again this weekend, boys. Any games that you're looking forward to in particular?
Well, I'm commentating on Toulon against Sale. So I'm going to talk Ebenezer up, and I'm probably going to drop into comms that he smashed the life out of Jim Hamilton a few years ago when South Africa played Scotland. So I'm looking forward to that game.
Profile. Any profile's good profile, Andrew. For me, it's got to be Argent versus London Irish.
In the Champions. Sorry, in the, what's it called? I don't even know. In the Challenge Cup, yeah, that'd be a big one.
So it's that one, and Pooh versus Worcester as well, which is an 8 o'clock kickoff.
Oh, you're over. But there are, I mean, it's actually quite hard to get your head around the format this year as well, because it's obviously a compressed tournament, slightly different to what we're used to, the usual groups of 4 and stuff. So as a fan, you've really got to look at, what your team are doing, who they're playing against, because they're not playing against teams necessarily. Well, they're not playing against teams in their pool, are they? So it's a bit of a minefield, but it's only 4 games this year, isn't it? As opposed to 6. So
who knows? Who knows, mate? It's just everything is just gone over my head.
It's interesting. Like, you look at some of the way the groups are formatted, and Exeter as champions, they've actually got a pretty tough run, haven't they? But yeah, they'll get off to an easy win this weekend against Glasgow.
Did you see Port Glasgow? They're not going to go in with confidence, but I'm sure that is in the good, the bad, and the whatever it's called at the end, the ugly. In answer to your question, Andy Rowe, the game of the weekend for me is #always Ulster. Stand up, us up, for the Ulster men versus Toulouse. Always a good game. I don't know whether that's because I've got Trevor Brennan in my mind when I think about that fixture. Ulsterman, then Toulouse, hard as nails, second hardest of the rugby era that I remember. So I'm looking forward to that on Friday. Neat.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Gertie. Thanks, producer Tim. Thank you very much for listening. And don't forget to hit subscribe on whatever platform you get your podcasts on. Leave us a review and check us out on YouTube as well.